everybody, and welcome back to Shaman Talk with Tegan. Tarot with Tegan is where you'll find me on social media. Okay, so today we're going to get into the nitty gritty and we're going to talk about ego. So, talking about ego is a very intricate, very diverse topic. So I just want to put that out there because in this, like 30-minute video, I can barely scratch the surface of the ego and what pertains to it, what doesn't, how you can help shed your ego. It's just like the ego is such a big part of who we are that there's no possible way I could give you all the info that I have. And I'm sure there's info I don't even have about the ego. So just keep that in mind. I'm going to probably generalize a little bit in this video for the sake of time and use very brief general examples. But it's a very in-depth topic and really one that I think everyone should look into at some point. So as I've said in one of my earlier videos, part of my shamanic training, the first like half of it almost, is doing a deep dive into your shadow self, into your subconscious and your triggers and all that. And so the big thing that comes up in the beginning is ego. So when you hear the word ego, I'm sure a lot of people, sometimes when I bring it up, people almost take it offensively, and I don't mean it offensively whatsoever. Most of us have an ego, and that's how we identify ourselves. That's how we go about life. That's how we protect ourselves. And so that's normal. But what I'm talking about ego isn't about being egotistical or full of yourself or things like that. That certainly can be part of it. But ego is bigger than that. Ego is present whenever there is, things, extreme emotions like anger and fear. Fear is a big indicator of ego. And now, obviously, when I say fear, I'm not talking about extreme situations in which you might be literally physically in danger. In that case, fear is your friend and trying to help you survive. But I'm talking about a deep rooted fear that comes out in different situations where your life is not in danger. And I think fear in itself is a whole nother topic I want to get into because I think a lot of us live in constant fear and we have no idea. We don't recognize it as fear. So the ego, it's what's trying to keep us separated. It's what keeps us separated from others, keeps us singular on our own. It tries to contradict everyone and everything, tries to control and sabotage ourselves and other people, and it's very limiting. Side note, if you see me look down a lot, I have a bunch of notes because I don't want to go on tangents on this episode. I just want to try and stick to what I'm trying to say. So whenever those types of situations come up, that's the ego. And so our ego does try to protect us. If we've gone through traumas, whether this lifetime or past lifetimes, your ego can literally create a block, right? Trying to be like, well, we don't have to think about that. Let's just shove that away. And in some instances, maybe that's necessary at the time. That's okay. But in the grand scheme of things, which is where I'm trying to come from most of the time, a different view, a bigger, wider view of things, those blocks are only going to come around to bite you in the ass at some point. So part of what I do is removing those blocks because, it's a therapy thing. It's a quote, I guess. Like, you got to feel it to heal it. You got to understand what's there so that we can clear it. Okay. So the ego's more than just I'm great. I'm better than you. The ego is fear and anger. And the second you see someone and you think, oh, no, 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 don't like that person. Um, it's anything that makes you feel better than someone. So let me go down to my next thing here. How do you know if your ego is coming up? If it's your ego or it's truly something that needs to be brought up or needs to be done or something that really is wrong? There are things in this world, there are times where justice needs to happen and if people need to put themselves out there maybe. But your ego, anytime you have the thought or you say out loud something like, well, I know better because of blah, 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 that's ego. You don't necessarily actually know better than someone. Or I'm better than because of this, this, this. That's ego. Especially when we are in this political climate. Unfortunately, I haven't seen it as much, but especially on social media, we see things like, if you don't share this opinion with me, then you are wrong. Or if you think otherwise, then you're part of the problem. And guess what? Even if you feel your intentions are good, you think you're on the right side of things, that is your ego coming out. That is not something that's actually helpful in the grand scheme of things. In order to make change and have lasting change with good intention, we have to try and shed our ego, even just a little bit. So if you're someone who has a different opinion than someone, and instead of being able to hear them out in a calm manner, you immediately get triggered, that's not that other person's problem. That's your problem. That's the ego coming out trying to roar and say, no, I know better. You don't know what you're talking about. You can't think this way. Or if you don't think this way, you're wrong. When in reality, that's absolutely not the case. Now, are there options in times in life when maybe there's a more loving option or an opinion that comes from more love than scarcity or lack? Of course. And that's the whole thing, though, is you have to ask yourself, when you have these strong opinions or that you're having arguments with people constantly, where is your side coming from? Is it because you truly deeply believe and you're just trying to come from the goodness of your heart? Or is it because you need to make a point and you need to be right about that point and no one else knows what they're talking about? Because if you're being honest with yourself and that's more your answer, no judgment, but that's the ego talking. That's not facts. That's not something that someone else needs to deal with because you're right. That's your ego coming out. The ego can also come out not just in extreme things where we're constantly arguing with people or arguing with ourselves even. The ego comes out when we need to feel seen and feel heard. And this is kind of the stereotypical ego you hear about, right? Like egotistical, I need to be in front of the camera because I can change the world. Which, if that's coming from a genuine place, like I'm coming from a place of truly just trying to help anyone who wants to listen, but I know there are some people who are going to listen to me and think I'm nuts or just not resonate with it, and that's okay. But then there are some people who make videos because they know what's best for everyone. They know better than everyone, and everyone needs to listen, And so that's when the ego comes out. It's all about intention. So we have this problem as well. And this is really something I've noticed in society. And some people are going to have their opinions about this. And this also might be a bit of a trigger for people if you watch this video, and that is not my intention. But if you are triggered about what I'm about to say next, that is always a call to sit with yourself. Okay? If you're triggered, that's your problem. Check your triggers. That's kind of the thing you hear floating around these days. And it's very true. Okay. What I'm going to say next about the ego is constantly needing to label ourselves or identify ourselves and make this claim out loud, like, this is who I am and you better respect it. Of course, we should have respect for everyone. That's just basics, but you cannot force people to do something. That is also ego. So what I'm talking about is, even if you're someone who's a mother, which I am, but I don't solely identify as that. I just am, and that's where we kind of need to try and get. The goal is to just live, not be like, I'm a mom, here are my mom things, I'm only a mom, that's all that matters. Or, having to label ourselves when it comes to our gender, to our sexuality. It's fine if that's your stepping stone to self-acceptance. That's great. But the thing I see and hear is, I'm this, I'm bi, I'm non-binary, I'm this, I'm he, I'm she, I'm they, which is fine. Again, you can do what you want. But ultimately, needing that label on ourselves, needing to label other people things, needing to be in our own little box of, hey, I'm this and that, and you're not allowed, is stemming from ego. This need to feel accepted and to push it into people's faces and say, hey, you better call me by the right pronouns, otherwise, you're wrong, you're bad, whatever it is, that's still ego. How do you get over the ego part? Identify yourself however you'd like, but ultimately, you just don't matter. It doesn't matter about labels. When you can transcend the ego, labels don't matter. You just live your life how you want to live it. There's no need to constantly defend yourself, no need to constantly put it in people's faces. And of course, I just mentioned gender and sexuality, but this is with anything where you feel, oh, this person's that, they can't come over here. This person's, maybe it's religion. This person's Jewish, sorry, you can't come over here, or whatever it is that's going on. If you're labeling yourself, labeling other people, putting yourself in these teeny tiny little boxes that nobody else can come in, that's just further separation. So it's like we have this juxtaposition happening in society where, like I said, on one hand, being able to accept people for who they are and accept that there's people who are transgender, women who like women, like that's great. But ultimately, we are not to where we need to be yet, because eventually we need to get to the point where none of that matters. Like, who cares? Like, you're this and that, cool, okay, that doesn't change who you are. That doesn't change, from my perspective, your energy and how we might click and how we might not click and things like that. So we have to try and see these things, like I said, this wider perspective of, even though we're headed in the right direction, we're not there yet because the ego's still attached, especially if you're someone who's constantly at battle with other people about whatever it is you're trying to say. That's the ego kicking in. When you're at a place of no ego, you don't feel the need to defend yourself constantly. You don't feel the need to always put your opinion forward and make your voice heard. It's being in a place of just being centered and knowing that even if people don't understand you, that's fine. Not everyone has to understand you. And I, as a human, understand people wanting to feel seen, wanting to feel heard, wanting to be accepted. These are all normal things, but we also need to understand that the end goal, so to speak, is not to constantly put ourselves in these little boxes and with all these different labels and all these differences. Like I said earlier, that's just more separation. So, something to think about. Let's move on here to the other part of ego, which I've kind of hinted at so far, and that is projection. I'm sure a lot of you have heard of it. It's when you see someone else and you project your own insecurities on them. The random example I'm going to use, again, the literal examples could go in the millions, you know what I mean? Could be anything. But let's say you're at the grocery store and you see a woman, and she's dressed to the nines, hair done, makeup done, has this fancy dress. If you're someone who is maybe insecure about yourself for whatever reason, what you might do is see that woman and project onto her your insecurities, meaning you have the thought of why is she dressed like that to go to the grocery store? That's ridiculous. This woman must be ridiculous, or she's dumb, or she's this, or she's that. And really, in reality, you have no idea why she's dressed like that. Maybe she just came from somewhere. She's going somewhere. Maybe she just wanted to, and she has that right. But what's happening is you're projecting your own insecurities onto that woman because your ego can't handle the fact that maybe you think, wow, that woman's prettier than me, or that woman clearly has more money than me. It's these deeper rooted things that are coming up. And if you're not aware of this, then it's probably happening all the time. And for your sake and the others around you, It's better to become aware. So that's why you hear check your triggers, because that's where you're going to be projecting. So some of you hearing this are going to say, I've been actually really good at not projecting my own issues onto other people, and you're going to be absolutely correct. But some of you are also going to say that, and you're going to be absolutely incorrect. So another part of this whole ego projection thing is being able to be honest with ourselves. That's a very hard thing to do. From a personal note, being able to look at yourself objectively and be like, oh, I'm the problem in this situation or whatever's going on. Like, that's me. That's on me. That's a hard thing to do for most people. And it was hard for me to understand, like, hey, this is where I'm going wrong, not that other person or just a general thing that's happening in life. So this is why I always tell people when I work with clients who are really like going through something, like, you need time alone. Sit with your thoughts, no phone, no social media, don't have someone over in your sphere. Sit by yourself, and you need to observe your thoughts. And some people, I know they're joking, but they say things like, oh, that's a scary thing to do, no thank you. But some of you are being very real in that aspect, and that is the biggest call to action that I've ever heard. That if you can't sit alone with your thoughts for even a few minutes, that's a problem. And I'm not trying to make people feel bad. I'm not judging whatsoever. That is a call to sit with yourself, and you need to observe and think and be like, what do I do from here? For some of you, it might be, hey, I need to go to therapy. Or some of you might be in therapy and it's like, I need to actually physically get rid of these thoughts and feelings. You see someone like me and I can help you physically remove them. So again, the ego is so vast. That's why it's so hard to make one single video about it. It goes like this and it spreads. And I'm going to bring it back to projection here, because I'm going to give one more example, and I'm going to use me just because I can really only talk about me, not someone else. But if someone comes up to me at this point and they're like, oh, hey, you're that tarot card reader, or you're that shaman. Yeah, what you do is stupid, or what you do is not real. Old me, before I started shedding my ego, would have gone, wow, okay, asshat, like, thanks for your opinion, bye. Me now would be like, okay, then just leave it, because there's no point in arguing with this person. Their mind is made up. And I know that in this situation, anyways, that's their own fear talking to me. They're not necessarily actually trying to make me mad, or maybe they are, but what's happening is their own fear of what I do and my abilities is scaring them in some capacity. It's either that literally just the thought of ghosts and aliens and all this stuff actually being real is just too scary for them, which I don't blame people. That's okay. Or it's more a fear of if they have to start believing, which they don't, but if they do, that means that they're going to open themselves up to criticism from others around them. I hear a lot of people when they do say something like, oh, well, I do believe in this or that, but, people around me don't like it, or, that's real fear of rejection from the people around you. The third situation that could possibly be for the fear is that maybe it's something like they're very religious. So if they have to accept that what I do is legitimate and that there are entities and spirits and things like that out there, that shakes their entire foundation of their life and their belief system. So they are scared because they have lived only in one way, only one thought process before. And now what? Now they have to change what they think and what they know. And that's scary. And some people will hit that point and be like, screw that. No, I'm going hard the other way and not believing and going to call people names who do that kind of thing. But for the few who are brave enough, they start to think, maybe the things I've been told or grew up with aren't necessarily true. Doesn't mean I have to give up everything I believe or have ever believed in, but there's just so much out there that I don't even know about. So all this, those are examples of projection, and it can be hard on the receiving end for sure, because sometimes people will just come at you for no reason, seemingly. And if you're not aware of these things, that's when arguments start. That's when separation starts. Oh, that person's crazy, or that person's dumb, or whatever. If you're aware of what the ego is doing, if you're aware of what projection is, when you're, getting projected onto, you can take a step back from it. You can say, okay, this person is projecting onto me, which doesn't make it okay, but I can understand now that they have their own issues that don't actually have anything to do with me. This is something in them that's deep rooted that they need to deal with, So just if we can become more aware of these things, we can just be a little bit like nicer to each other. And we need to learn to take more personal responsibility. I'm looking down here because when we learned about it through my training, it was said really well. It says projection is giving power to an external force. And it's an excuse not to take responsibility for your own life decisions, for your own emotions, and for your own triggers. That's all projection is. And again, if you're someone who's sitting there saying, oh, I don't do that, I urge you to really think about it. Be honest with yourself. And here's the thing, if you can do that and you think, oh, crap, I do that all the time, the next step is not to blame yourself, not to feel shame, not to feel angry. I mean, obviously I'm saying that, but you might feel that. And that's normal, but we don't have to do that. As soon as we recognize these patterns, the next step is to stop them and heal them. And that's the point where you might need some help, and that's okay. Knowing when to ask for help is great. So, that's also something I hear. It's like people are starting to recognize their triggers and the things that make them tick, but then they're falling, their egos like, enough, stop there, don't keep going. Because then they use that as an excuse for the continued negative behavior. Someone might be like, oh, a trigger of mine is so-and-so, or this specific situation. Well, now I know that's my trigger, and either I'm just going to avoid it, or if it happens, it happens. The worst thing I hear is, that's just who I am. Okay? That's not how you have to continue living, though. If it's something that's negatively impacting you or impacting the ones around you, then you don't have to stay that. The next step after figuring out our triggers, after figuring out our projections, is to heal them. How you do that is up to you, but, there are many different routes to take in the healing process. So, that was a lot of info to just spew out there. And like I said, this is just like the basics, like scratching the surface. I'm sure I'll make another video, or I'm going to mention it in other ones because there's so many other paths in my mind wanted to go down, but I stuck to my notes. So, ego, it comes out in many ways. Anytime you're trying to make separation, contradict other people or yourself, you're not just feeling what's going on. That's another thing you can do too. When you feel your ego like coming up, it's like, take a step back and listen to like your feelings, listen to your heart, as corny as it might sound to some of you, and trying to understand what's going on in that area rather than the logical. I need food, I need money, I need power, I need sex, I need whatever it is. That's your ego. That's stemming from your lower chakras. And also, sex is a whole nother one. I made a video about this a couple months ago, but when you have certain thoughts of like, oh, I haven't gotten laid in so long, like I deserve this, or I also hear, like, oh, we're all just animals. Stop saying that. We are not just animals. You might be part of the animal kingdom, but what defines us as not being animals is the fact that we have a soul and we have a specific energy that is meant to be here to learn and grow. That's just part of the ego, making excuses for negative behavior. Okay? So, the biggest part of this in understanding your ego is honesty. You got to be honest with yourself. And again, that's another huge hurdle for people because some of us, our ego has been lying to us in a way for so long that we don't even fully understand our truth. And I don't say that to be rude. It's just a fact at this point for a lot of people. Maybe not all, but a lot. So if you can start to be honest with yourself, it's not going to be sunshine and rainbows. I can tell you that. But if you can understand yourself on that deeper level and heal yourself on that kind of level, even if it's just very slowly, the liberation you feel is worth it, because then you start to live your life the way you are meant to live, not the way society wants you to live, not the way your mom wants you to live, not the way your girlfriend's trying to make you live because she wants to live in a specific way. Does that make sense? Okay. So my last little bit here that I'm going to just say, when you look at the state of the world, and again, your ego's looking at it a lot through the lens of fear, especially if you watch the news a lot. I'm not saying don't understand what's happening in the world, but if you consume too much of that, most of it is fear-based, right? That's just feeding into the ego to keep us in a state of fear, to be like, oh God, oh no, what's next? I don't know what's happening. We got to disconnect a little bit, okay? And, people will have, well, what's the solution? How do we end these wars? How do we end the violence? How do we do this? How do we do that? The answer is simple. The answer is that we need to shed our ego. That's it. I have the answer. And not just me. There are plenty of other people on the spiritual path who will say the same thing or something very similar. How do we all make this world a better place? By shedding our ego. Because when we shed our ego, we get rid of the need to separate and be different from everybody and keep everybody in separate boxes. We welcome in more love, more joy, more acceptance, understanding that we can still be different, have different cultures, different religions, different genders, but still be on this path all together, merging our ideas and our differences to make a better place. Now, what the answer is simple, but the work to get there is not. And that's why we're at this stalling point, is because a lot of us are on this precipice. In this time in history, in the world, in the universe, it's like it's time to step over that threshold, to really try and understand ourselves, understand our triggers, our shadow self, get rid of our ego. But so many people are kind of just shaking in their boots, standing at that line, not ready to cross. And again, I get it. It's hard, it's work, but it's worth it. So if you're someone who feels they're still there, you got to just give yourself that push over the edge to understand and to try and shed the ego. Because once you start doing that, even if, I don't claim to be fully gone, my ego is not fully gone. I just came out of a cycle personally about acceptance and a little bit of anger, that's still in there, and I have to work through it. But I have shed it enough to understand, oh, hey, in certain situations, I was the judgmental one, or I was projecting my own bullshit onto somebody else. As soon as we can stop doing that to each other, the sooner we'll just be all that much happier. Doesn't mean we'll never have any kind of differences again or disagreements, but then we can come from a place of more love and acceptance when we have these disagreements, whether it's on a big scale or a small scale, whatever it is. We all need to take a step back. Okay, we're going to stop there, because otherwise this will turn into a 2-hour episode and we don't need that. So if you're someone who has listened to this, first of all, thank you, and has questions or comments, concerns, you're angry, that's okay. Comment, message me, my email. That's my email as well, at gmail.com. Again, you can find me on Instagram or Facebook. You can send me a message. I'm just trying to put this information out there so we can start healing, so we can all help each other, so we can start a conversation if that's what needs to happen. Even if you're not happy with me, that's okay. Let's talk about it. And again, when I'm making these videos, I'm coming from my own experience, my own knowledge, but that doesn't mean I have all the answers or what I'm saying is absolute. So that's why I keep saying, let's start a conversation, because you might have something to add. You might be a psychiatrist or a therapist and be like, actually, let's think about it this way. And you might be absolutely right. So let's get the conversation going and let's start healing ourselves so that we can be the best versions of ourselves and for, the planet, so we can make this world the place it was meant to be. Okay? You can do it. I have faith in you, even if you feel no one else does. I do. You can do it.